Donald Trump's full 28-point peace plan for Ukraine has been released, and I have thoughts. My first thought, though, is on the origin, because I just called it Donald Trump's peace plan. That's what the news is calling it. But is it? Because apparently, according to reports, Senator Marco Rubio spoke to several senators on Saturday, and those senators, including Republican Mike Rounds, said that the secretary told them the plan was not created by the US, but rather it's one they received. But Rubio then publicly denied the private denial, stating the peace proposal was authored by the US. It is offered as a strong framework for ongoing negotiations. It is based on input from the Russian side, but it's also based on previous and ongoing input from Ukraine. Senator Angus King, by the way, said the plan is not the administration's position. It's essentially the wish list of the Russians. And that is definitely true. By the way, you can see Marco Rubio tweeting about this, saying that the input thing. No, this is the Russian plan. This is everything the Russians could want. This is more than I thought the Russians would ask for. And Trump likes it so much, he's calling it his plan. And by the way, we have to jump into it. We got to get to, first of all, the reason that we are being told by the media that this is actually strong in defense of Ukraine. And it's this point. All the news stories lead with this. It states that any future significant, deliberate, and sustained armed attack by Russia on Ukraine, quote, shall be regarded as an attack threatening the peace and security of the transatlantic community, and the US and its allies will respond accordingly, including through military force. But that was already the case we were in, and we were already aiding them. That was the status quo that we already had. They're pretending this is some new big security guarantee, but that's what we expected before they invaded, except now in the future, Russia will know everything that they learned from this experience, which is that they can again invade, conquer territory. And if they're just brutal enough, and if they have a guy in office who cares so little about Ukraine and so much about business opportunities, then he'll just hand over the territory. This is not a strong defense guarantee. It's just, again, it's just an admission of the disgusting status quo that Donald Trump doesn't have a problem with. And by the way, the most important thing that you need to know about this Trump peace plan is this gives Russia more Ukrainian territory than Russia militarily controls in Ukraine right now. It's not even like they keep everything they have. They get more than they have right now. This is not just a Russian plan. This is Russia like making a mockery of Donald Trump and him willingly putting his name on it for a reason, which I will describe, but it's not a good reason, and it's certainly not a reason that's designed to help Ukraine. The only possible way that I've been able to think of that this could be more of a win for Russia would be that I don't even, maybe full military disarmament of Ukraine. I mean, they're moving in that direction, but they don't get all the way there. In any event, let's jump to some of the specifics. 28 points, too many. We're not gonna talk about all of them. But I love number one, Ukraine's sovereignty will be confirmed. Get the hell out of it. Oh, you mean the sovereignty of the territory they're allowed to have? Not the full thing, obviously. This is the exact opposite of sovereignty. They were invaded and half their country was taken, and you're okay with that. Interesting. By the way, number three is it's expected that Russia will not invade neighboring countries and NATO will not expand further. Yeah, that's what we thought before they invaded Ukraine. I love it's expected. It's like a norm or whatever. What are norms worth in 2025? I ask you that. Going on, they're going to limit the Ukrainian armed forces. They're going to cut it from 800 or so thousand down to 600,000. Ukraine is going to write into its constitution that it won't join NATO. NATO will not station troops in Ukraine. And I've always said this throughout this conflict about the myth, the narrative that Russia told us about why they had to invade. They say we had to because they were going to invade NATO and we can't allow that. But the only reason they would care if they're in NATO is that would make it more difficult to invade. And so they had to invade before that. If they have no plans to invade in the future, why would they care if Ukraine was in NATO? Why would they care if Ukraine had 800,000 soldiers? Why would they care if the US put bases in Ukraine if they weren't planning to eventually invade it and that would make it really inconvenient in the future? It's BS, absolute BS. And they have an extra layer of BS that they put. And the fact that Donald Trump would allow this to go into the final thing when it is such obvious BS is an insult to all of us. Number 10, the US guarantee. The US will receive compensation for the guarantee. That will return to more on that. If Ukraine invades Russia, it will lose the guarantee. Oh yeah, you know how Ukraine is constantly gonna invade Russia. Absolute BS. It's BS that they would do it in the future. They're obviously not going to do that, but Russia has to pretend that they might do that to justify them not getting into NATO. In the same way that they had to pretend that they invaded them in the first place because they thought that Ukraine might end up invading them. There was never a threat of that. It was never gonna happen. This is insane propaganda, but Donald Trump is pretending to believe it so that he could get this deal. And why? Why is it so important to get this deal? Has nothing to do with the military, security, anything like that. It's this, and I apologize, there's a lot of bullet points there. If you want, you can go on Axios and you can read them. Basically, it's a bunch of stuff that says this is about extracting minerals. This is about developing infrastructure, including specifically data centers and artificial intelligence. They're gonna do AI stuff, they're gonna do crypto stuff. And why would we care so much about that? Well, according to this, the US will receive 50% of the profits from this venture. Why? Well, I mean, it would be nice, I guess, if you could benefit from that. And you know who could benefit from that? The guy who's totally in charge of all of that infrastructure and mineral extraction. And you know who that is? This is not speculation, it's written in the plan. It's Donald Trump. Donald Trump will be the head of the Peace Council. He will be monitoring and guaranteeing every part of that agreement, which includes all of that economic stuff about developing data centers and extracting wealth, and we'll get 50%, and you don't think he's gonna find a way to take a significant portion of that? Would you like another piece of evidence that that's the way it's gonna go? This plan was drafted, they say. Again, I don't really believe they were that involved in it. I think Russia took care of most of it. Steve Witkoff, the guy who went and made that backdoor deal with the UAE to get $2 billion put into World Liberty Financial, that guy, and Jared Kushner, you know, noted expert on Ukraine and Russia, Jared Kushner. No, if you cared about Ukrainian sovereignty, if you cared even about mineral extraction, you would have no role for Jared Kushner. You know why you'd have Jared Kushner? Because he's a businessman that Donald Trump has worked with, and he banged Donald Trump's daughter. And so they're connected by family and by business. And so they're gonna set up a deal where their families are going to make bank. Why is Jared Kushner involved in the plan for Gaza? Why is he involved with the plan for Ukraine? He's a Manhattan real estate guy. He's not a diplomat. He doesn't know anything about this. This is setting up years of massive, massive corruption, JR. And I apologize for going on. What do you think?
It's necessary because this is how deep this really goes. In fact, it could go even further, John. You could have read through each of those plans and those bullet points and gotten more of the exact of the absolute level of corruption and money-making dealings, and also, by the way, lack of actual plans for what it is that they're saying that they would be about doing, which is bringing some kind of peace. So what it is, as we're seeing all this exposure happen, makes a lot more sense of all the things we saw during the campaign. The way that this administration, from the very beginning, they were afraid to, even when they were asked directly, did Russia invade Ukraine? Couldn't answer the simplest of questions because they were carrying water. So we're seeing this exposure continue, the layers get peeled back further and further to the point where Marco Rubio is disagreeing with Marco Rubio. And the only reason we're supposed to believe Marco Rubio is to not believe all the Republican senators who have been kissing his ass and Donald Trump's for all this time. But some reason when they get some information, talk about it, specifically Mike Rounds is one of the folks that was heading this, a Republican, talking about what he asked Rubio he could say, given that permission to say it. Then when said it, is being told that he's lying about it. It's crazy, bro. Not even the degree to which they've dug in to try and extract minerals and have some other kind of resources because they suck at doing things on their own. All that it being baked in as well, they can't even get their corrupt story straight. The fact that you're this deep in corruption and deal making and taking over countries and being partners with Vladimir Putin and carrying his plans out, all this is getting exposed. They're not even good at doing it that way. It's so crazy, but they still want people to sit back and believe them because their answer at the end of all this, no matter what the corruption is, no matter what the devastating story is from Epstein to this, is trust us, bro. Yeah. We wouldn't do that.
Yeah, this
when all we've seen is to not trust them and to not believe what it is that they said they're doing and not doing. One last thing, you mentioned how Rubio pointed out another lie that Rubio is exposed by. How this plan has got Russian input, It got EU input, it got Ukraine input, and American input. Why is it that the meeting, it was pointed out, the meeting that they had with Steve Witkoff, who kisses Vladimir Putin's ass, was between him, a Russian advisor to him, Marco Rubio, and there was no Ukrainian or European officials there. How did they contribute? Osmosis, I don't know.
They're doing what everybody does here in the US and internationally. You just hand over a bunch of money to Donald Trump and you can do whatever you want and he won't care as long as he gets paid. That's all it is. This is just mafia politics.